I gave birth to twin babies. I'm expecting a gift of $12,000 for the birth celebration. Julia said this with a triumphant voice. I responded loudly to Julia. Okay. I'll come with my husband, the real estate king worth $500 million. Huh? Julia's bewildered voice could be heard over the phone. She probably heard from our parents that my marriage partner was a shabby ordinary man. What do you mean by $500 million? Exactly what I said. Julia seemed confused by my words. I couldn't help but chuckle. Then Julia, taken aback, retorted. That can't be possible, because… Well, let's discuss everything in person, including your behavior at that time. Wait a minute, sis. Then, I'll come tomorrow. I said that unilaterally and hung up the phone. Julia called me several times, but I ignored all of them. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Imagining Julia's regretful face, I laughed out loud. My name is Anna Morrison. I am a 38-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, Ben. A housekeeper does the housework, so I live elegantly every day. However, Ben is my second husband. I divorced my first husband 6 years ago. I met Ben afterwards at a restaurant where I was working, and we remarried. My first husband, Chris, and I were married at my parents' recommendation. My father liked Chris, the president of a company that did business with my parents' company. I had no say in the matter, and the marriage was decided the day after our arranged meeting. Arranged meetings were rare in modern societies, but as the eldest daughter, I was always told to take over the family business, so it didn't seem so strange. That's why our marriage was anything but sweet. Chris, the president of a company with an annual turnover of $50 million, rarely came home and was often out and about. When he did come home and saw me, he would just make a disgusted face and go to his bedroom. I was getting sick of that life when suddenly, I was called back to my parents' house. You should get a divorce. What? Why all of a sudden? I was puzzled by my mother's sudden words. Chris' company was on the rise. There was no benefit to divorcing now. Could it be that she was pained by my situation? Hoping so, I was shocked the next moment. Why are Chris and Julia? Julia is my sister, 10 years younger than me. My parents adored her, practically ignoring me. And there was Julia, arm in arm with Chris, entering the room. Oh, sis. I've taken a liking to Chris. So, I'll have him, okay? Anna Morrison have him? Chris isn't a toy. But Chris likes me more, you know? Right? Julia said that, leaning on Chris. Then, Chris looked at me with a smirk. The moment I saw his eyes, I had a bad feeling. Younger girls are better, and Julia is more beautiful. I think Julia would be better as the wife of a CEO. How could you? Mom. I, feeling like I was about to be discarded for being older and not as young as Julia, called out to my mom for help. I was raised strictly as the eldest daughter, but I believed my mom loved me. That's why I told you to get divorced quickly. Give Chris to Julia since she wants him. You're the older sister, right? How could you? I was dumbfounded. I knew my mom favored Julia, but I never expected her not to be on my side, especially at a time like this. Then, my dad quietly spoke up. Just get divorced quickly. From today, Julia will be the successor of this house. It's shameful to have someone with a stain in the family registry. Once you're divorced, get out of here. Dad too. With tears blurring my vision, I received the divorce papers. Then, as my parents instructed, I packed up my belongings and was quickly kicked out of the house. Sis, you're going to have a hard time from now on, right? Here, take this as compensation. Julia is so kind. Be thankful. The two of them mockingly threw a bundle of cash at me. Holding the cash, I was at a loss for what to do next. What am I going to do now? Being a housewife, I had no means of earning money. After all, I had been trained in bridal training but had never even worked a part-time job. For the time being, I decided to go to a hotel to think about what to do next. First, I decided to secure a place to live. I moved to the next town and went to a real estate agency. Thanks to some savings I had, I was able to rent a place suitable for living alone without much trouble. I absolutely did not want to use the compensation thrown at me by the two. I was determined to get revenge someday. After renting a one-room apartment, the next step was to find a job. However, it was difficult to find employment. Then, I received a call from Julia on my smartphone. "Sis, didn't you know that Chris has influence over this whole area? No matter where you apply, you won't get hired." How could this be? I was at a loss. As Julia said, I was unable to find a job. Without the ability to work, my savings would eventually run out. I decided to move to a town far away. The place I moved to was a peaceful town, with the scent of the sea breeze. There, I was hired by a small restaurant and was able to work and live there. "Hey, give me some beer." "Yes. I'd like some snacks." Understood. Though I was not used to it, the customers were all kind to me as I served them food. Gradually, I began to do more, and eventually, people started calling me the poster girl of the place. Thanks to Anna's smile, I can do my best tomorrow too. "Aren't you going to get married, Anna?" "Ah. I'm not thinking about marriage anymore. That's such a waste." Right? I was often encouraged to remarry because I was still young, but each time, I would dodge the question. I definitely did not want to end up with someone like Chris again. "Anna, can I have a beer?" "Sure, Ben. You've had a long tiring day, haven't you?" Amidst everyone suggesting I remarry, Ben was the only regular who never made such teasing remarks. I found our conversations very comforting, and I started looking forward to his visits. It was about 3 years after I moved to this town that Ben asked me out on a date. "Would you like to go see the ocean?" "Huh? Ah, well, it's right in front of us." Seeing Ben flustered, which was uncharacteristic of his usually calm demeanor, made me chuckle. I didn't mind at all. I decided to accept his invitation. Our first date was nothing more than a walk on the sandy beach in front of the small restaurant, but we talked about various things. Ben shared that he had lost his parents early and was living alone in this town, which his parents loved. I talked about my family and Chris. Then, Ben cried on my behalf. I thought to myself, so, this is how I should have cried. I watched the tears flow from Ben's eyes with these thoughts in mind. After that, we went out together many times and eventually started dating. Honestly, I can't remember who said, "I love you" first. However, our relationship began very naturally. About a year later, Ben proposed to me. I always want to sail the ocean in the same boat as you." "Is that a proposal?" "That's the intention." I smiled warmly at Ben's lack of confidence and accepted his proposal. Then we got married. I had no intention of telling my parents or sister, but Ben suggested we at least inform my parents, so I contacted them for the first time in 4 years and decided to return home. "Oh, you're alive. Remarrying? Do as you please. But don't expect any support from us. If you're going to remarry such a poor-looking man, don't ever come back to this house." I was furious, my face turning red in front of Ben. Indeed, Ben does not have a taste for luxury. But he was wearing a high-brand suit that day. Despite this, I didn't want to have any more to do with parents who would say such things. I was about to speak out in anger when Ben said, "Then, I will take your daughter with me. We won't contact you again or ask for any support." Ben. My parents were surprised by Ben's forthright attitude but soon became angry, calling it rude. Ben, however, handled my parents with a smile and led me away from my childhood home. I didn't expect it to be that bad. "I'm sorry for making you feel uncomfortable." "No, don't worry about it. I feel a bit relieved." I said this with a smile to Ben, who seemed to relax a bit at my expression. Then, we returned to our new home. After a while, the number of anonymous calls increased. I ignored all of them and consulted with Ben. Let's ignore them. But it's creepy, so let's change our number tomorrow. Yes, thank you. I was very grateful for Ben's prompt response. The next morning, Ben made time immediately, and we went to change our phone number. After that, the anonymous calls stopped. I was relieved. However, soon after, I began receiving multiple calls from unknown numbers. Hello. The caller would hang up without saying anything. Feeling very uncomfortable, I consulted with Ben again. He suggested ignoring calls from unknown numbers, so I ignored all such calls. Eventually, the calls ceased, and I gradually forgot about the whole incident. One day, I received a call from my childhood home, which I had forgotten to remove from my phone book after cutting ties. Reluctantly, I answered, expecting it to be my mother, but it was Julia. Hello, sis. How are you? Julia. Don't sound so scary. It's understandable that my voice would reveal my feelings, as she's the last person I'd ever want to speak to. For starters, I decided to confirm my immediate suspicion. How did you get my number? It was easy to find. You know, I have money. Her tone confirmed to me that Julia hadn't changed at all. I was about to hang up when Julia started talking excitedly. I gave birth to twin babies. I'm expecting a gift of $12,000 for the birth celebration. Julia said this with a triumphant voice. I responded loudly to Julia. Okay. I'll come with my husband, the real estate king worth $500 million. Huh? Julia's incredulous voice came through the phone. She probably heard from our parents that my husband was some ordinary, unremarkable man. What do you mean by $500 million? Exactly what I said. Julia seemed confused by my words. I couldn't help but chuckle. Then, Julia snapped back. That can't be true, because... Well, we can talk about it in person, including what you did back then. Wait a minute, sis. Then, I'll come tomorrow. I unilaterally ended the call. Julia called several times after that, but I ignored all her calls. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I waited for Ben to come home and explained the situation. Ben smiled and suggested, I'll go in my usual attire. I nodded in agreement and decided to wear my usual clothes as well, and return to my childhood home. I'm home. Oh, you're back. Did you bring your husband? Wait. Julia, smiling, rushed to the entrance but was shocked by our attire. Naturally, since the clothes we wore were bought from a non-brand, common store, with each piece costing about $20. What's with those shabby clothes? Aren't you a real estate king? I responded with a smile. Julia interpreted it her way and made a mocking expression. So, it was a lie after all. You can't hide it even if you try to show off. Oh, it's not a lie. I pointed to my smartphone screen, which displayed Ben's name and photo. Julia stared at it intently before exclaiming. Ford, as in that major real estate group, the president? No way, it's no lie. At my words, Julia glared at me resentfully. Then, pointing at our clothes, she berated us. Then why are you wearing such shabby clothes? To that, I gave Julia a patronizing look. Because we need to dress according to the financial situation of the household, right? Excuse me? Are you saying our house has fallen on hard times? No, I judged that this level of courtesy was appropriate. Both Ben and I always make sure to dress nicely to show our regard when visiting someone's home. We've never disrespected anyone by wearing worn-out t-shirts and jeans. That's exactly why we deliberately chose to wear these clothes this time. There are two reasons for this choice. The first is to mislead Julia like we did and dampen her spirits. Seeing her frustrated face meant this was a success. The second reason became apparent as I started walking toward the living room, followed by Ben, with Julia trailing behind us. Having Ben by my side makes me feel incredibly supported. I energetically opened the living room door. You're making quite a racket. Be more demure like Julia when you open the door. What's with that cheap look? I'm truly disappointed in you. Their immediate reproach upon opening the door made me burst into quiet laughter, which made my parents look at me as if I were something suspicious. Julia was saying something about marrying a rich man, but it seems like Anna was just putting on airs. Exactly. That's all you can afford to wear, isn't it? We'd prefer you didn't cross our threshold in such cheap clothing. As my parents freely criticized me, I smiled and retorted. Maybe it's judging people by their clothes that's leading to the downfall of your business. What? My words made my parents blink in disbelief, while Julia looked puzzled. I decided to explain further. I heard that last year was a loss? And this term seems dubious too, how is it? That's none of your business. I'd like to say it's none of my business, but unfortunately, we're still legally related. My father glared at me angrily, his expression so similar to Julia's. It reminded me that I take after my mother, while Julia is more like our father. In fact, my father's company has been declining ever since Chris married Julia. Ben checked after Julia called, and far from recovering, the company's performance is only worsening. The second reason we wore low-priced clothes is this. We wanted to let our nearly bankrupt parents underestimate us, so when they learned we knew about their impending bankruptcy, the impact would be greater. I continued talking to my glaring parents with a sigh. I intend to renounce any inheritance when the time comes. You were planning on taking the inheritance? Money grubber. All of Mom and Dad's money is mine. Julia, who had been silent in the background, interrupted me with a bite in her voice. It seems she didn't understand what I was saying. Though I could explain it politely, it felt too bothersome. Just when I thought it was pointless to continue without explaining, Ben succinctly took over for me. Your parents' company is about to go bankrupt. What? Julia, surprised, looked at our parents, who awkwardly averted their gaze. Then, shockingly, Julia wrapped her arms around Ben's. So Ben, could you cover for them? In return, you can do whatever you want with me, just kidding. Despite Julia's light-hearted words, tension filled the air between Ben and me. Ben sighed heavily, forcibly removed Julia's arms, and spoke up. Could you stop? It's really disgusting. Disgusting? Me? Yeah, you. It's disgusting. Ben emphasized his point, clearly disturbed. Julia, apparently shocked, staggered away from Ben and then glared at me with teary eyes. How dare you say something so rude to me? I'm prettier than that plain sister of yours. What? That's impossible. Anna is slimmer, her skin is clearer, and her features are finer. More importantly, her heart is much purer. Ben went on to list my good qualities. My cooking skills, intelligence, compassion, and above all, my honesty. Hearing this, it sounded like I was some sort of perfect being, which was somewhat embarrassing. I tried to stop Ben by lightly tugging on his sleeve twice. Then, Ben turned to me with a warm smile. This modesty is another charm that sets you apart. Excuse me, Julia stomped her feet in frustration. Julia had grown considerably larger than the last time I saw her, likely gaining around 45 pounds. Her once admired beautiful face was now marred with acne and blemishes, far from pretty. It seemed like a combination of parental indulgence and a slowdown in metabolism due to age had caused her to gain weight, a lack of self-control typical of Julia. I sighed internally at this thought. However, my parents rushed to Julia's defense. Julia has just gotten a bit rounder after giving birth. She'll be back to her old self in no time. No, this is clearly the result of an unhealthy lifestyle. You stay out of this. My mother was furious, her face turning red as she yelled at me. The mother I once thought was absolute now didn't intimidate me at all after 6 years. I then shared another truth with them. By the way, there's a possibility that Julia's son isn't Chris's child, right? Hey, is that true? As I spoke, Chris's voice came from behind. Turning around, I saw Chris holding 2 babies. Oh, Chris. Long time no see. That doesn't matter. What are you talking about? Chris approached me angrily, but Ben stepped in to explain on my behalf. Anna told me about
anh với em chẳng còn yêu nhau quá nhiều. Bởi vì nhau ước mỗi lần lại vội xa vì bất ký ức chưa ngờ nhưng đành phải giả vờ phôi pha vì mình có cần nhau nữa thôi mà. Đã có quá nhiều những điều khiến cả hai bên thương, chẳng muốn nhưng dù gì cũng đã xảy ra. Chẳng rời xa anh lỡ thôi mà thấy em bên cạnh người ta, chẳng những thế mà còn trao nụ hôn hết ta đã. Em nói chỉ là bạn của em thế à, tìm được người thay thế anh rồi mình dừng lại em nhé. Đường tình mà mình vẽ có lẽ cũng đã hết gì có thể quên đi một người là chưa thể, nhưng phải tỏ ra mạnh mẽ để trái tim được phố về. Trái tim được phố về. Được phố về.
Chris, so we had someone look into it before coming here. We didn't expect to find anything so quickly, but Ben took out his smartphone, showing a photo of a man and woman entering a hotel hand in hand. Chris exclaimed upon seeing it. You're still seeing that guy? Then, Chris began to rant unasked. She cheated on me right after we got married, with that guy in the photo. She said it was just once, so I forgave her. Chris glared at Julia, who then glared back and retorted. Forgave me? You became a subsidiary of my dad's company and you're still so arrogant. What? You insisted it was the best move. Julia and Chris started blaming each other, their argument turning ugly. It seems that Chris's business became a subsidiary of my father's company shortly after their marriage, leading to its downfall. I should have never divorced Anna. What? Are you saying you prefer your ex-wife over me? Impossible. As Julia hysterically yelled, Chris raised his voice too. Of course. Anna never blamed me for cheating, and I was free to do as I pleased. If it were Anna's child, she would take care of it, so I wouldn't have to. Chris then seemed to have an epiphany. That's it. Anna, let's get remarried. It was our destiny to be together. Chris, getting ahead of himself, knelt before me in elation. I stepped back in disgust. Then, Ben stepped between Chris and me. Anna is my wife. There's no way she would remarry you. What? What are you? Move. Chris yelled at Ben in annoyance. From behind Ben, I responded clearly to Chris. I could never remarry you. I would never want your children. Oh, that's right, you couldn't have children. Still, it's impossible. Huh? What do you mean I can't have children? Chris stared at us, dumbfounded, just like my parents and Julia. I decided to explain to them. When I was still married to you, I went to the gynecologist. Remember, I had some tests done? Don't you remember? Ah, there was that time you dragged me to the gynecologist. But it was your fault, wasn't it? Chris seemed eager to believe it was my fault, insisting repeatedly that there was nothing wrong with his health. I confronted Chris with the truth that had been hidden for over 6 years. The one who couldn't have children was you, Chris. That's a lie, a lie. Then whose kids are these? They're mine, right? Unfortunately, they're not your children. Chris slumped in defeat upon hearing this. The nanny hurriedly took the babies from Chris' hands. In the background, Julia stood with her mouth agape. So, Julia, it seems they're not Chris's children. Sis, why didn't you tell me he had such a defect? If you had told me, by now. Julia began to shift the blame to me. I listened quietly until she calmed down a bit, then smiled and said, "You've made your bed, now lie in."
Trên con đường xưa trong làng quê, nụ cười không nói cho lòng vẫn vương. Rơi vòng tay cuối thơm mùi tóc em như bông đào trong cơn mê còn nhấp nháy. Ngày mai thôi đôi ta lìa xa em còn nhớ. Thật lòng anh muốn ta nhìn thấy nhau. Chớ quên màu câu yêu thương em với anh hôm nào. Đành nhìn em lòng anh đau nhói. Ngày đôi ta biệt ly. Giọt buồn chia đôi đường đi, lệ em tuôn ướt mi mưa giăng lối anh về. Trái đất như ngừng quay, sao mưa vẫn rơi vô tình. Nhưng cô đơn đành thôi quay bước, từng cầu mong em được vui. Ở nơi phương trời xa, có bao giờ em nhớ anh đang mong chờ. Vẫn mong em về đây, chung với anh đêm này. Tình yêu kia mãi mãi theo, suốt cuộc đời. xưa trong lần cuối, nụ cười không nói cho lòng vẫn vương, rơi vòng tay cuối thơm mùi tóc em như bông đào trong cơn mê còn ngất ngây. Ngày mai thôi đôi ta lìa xa em còn nhớ, thật lòng anh muốn ta nhìn thấy nhau, chớ quên màu câu yêu thương em với anh hôm nào. Anh luôn em lòng anh đau nhói, ngày đâu ta biệt ly, giọt buồn chia đôi đường đi, lệ em không ướt mi mưa giăng lối anh về. Trái đất như ngừng quay, sao mưa vẫn rơi vô tình, mình cô đơn đành thôi quay bước, vẫn cầu mong em được vui ở nơi phương trời xa. Có bao giờ em nhớ anh đang mong chờ, vẫn mong em về đây chung với anh đêm ngày. Tình yêu kia mãi 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 theo suốt cuộc đời.
It. What? Give me Ben then. Ben already refused you, remember? Then give me money. Families should help each other. You're the one to say that. Her words irritated me. There was never any mutual support in our family during tough times. Instead, I was met with cold indifference. Unfortunately, I'm not part of your family. You are. Come on, sis, don't be like that. Despite being annoyed by Julia's words, arguing back wouldn't help. I took a deep breath, preparing to respond, but my mother spoke before I could. Anna, I'm sorry for everything. But we're really struggling. If you really have money, could you help us? Right, Julia is correct. Family should help each other. Let's forget the past and move on. I was utterly dismayed by their words. Forgiveness is something the wronged party offers, not the wrongdoers. Realizing that urging them to reflect was futile, I let go of the last bit of familial affection I had and gave them a cold look. The three of them flinched at my gaze, but quickly forced a sickly smile. We apologize for everything, okay? Exactly, we're even asking nicely. You should compromise a little. Their unrepentant attitude was clear, making me sigh. With a smile only on my lips, I posed a question to my mother. Why should I go to such lengths for a half-sister and biological parents who oppressed me? Half-sister? What are you talking about? Julia is my daughter. Despite my father's lack of understanding, it seemed my mother grasped what I was implying, turning pale. What are you even saying, child? It's fine if you want to play dumb, but I saw you, Mom. I caught you cheating. Indeed, when I was still living at home, I had witnessed my mother bringing a man into our house. It happened shortly after they were married. Both my father and Chris were away on business trips, and Julia was on a vacation with her friends. It was just my mother and me at home. Returning from an errand my mother asked me to run, I found unfamiliar men's shoes at the door. Thinking we had a visitor, I checked the living room, but it was empty. Puzzled, I then heard voices coming from the bedroom. I wanted to cover my ears. However, the next words I heard made my eyes widen. He doesn't know Julia isn't his child. Julia isn't Dad's child. I covered my mouth with both hands, shocked. I wanted to hear more, but sensing them about to leave the bedroom, I quickly left the house to kill time and returned only after the man had left. Curious about that incident, I investigated right after marrying Ben and discovered the man was Mr. Thompson, an old friend of my father's. The affair was still ongoing. So, because you've been cheating with him all this time, and when Julia wanted Chris, you forced me out. What the hell does that mean? While my mother shook her head in denial, turning paler, even my typically oblivious father seemed to understand.
lucky. Feel so lucky, feel so lucky. Feel so lucky. Feel so lucky, feel so lucky. Feel so lucky. Feel so lucky, feel so lucky. You gotta notice, yeah, I'm falling in love. You're feeling something, yeah, you cannot control. Yes, in time you came and you changed all my perspective. Yes, in time you came and I love it, I love it. It's so great to have you in my life. Make me feel so lucky, feel so lucky, yeah. It's so great to have you in my life. Make me feel so lucky, feel so lucky, yeah. Feel so lucky, yeah. Feel so.
Glaring at my mother in fury, I decided to give my father a parting gift by naming my mother's lover. Mom's lover is Mr. Thompson. Thompson, she cheated with him even now. At my words, my father stood dumbfounded. Mr. Thompson was considered a close friend of my father, so the betrayal must have been especially shocking. However, even in such a situation, I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy for my father. I'm not Dad's child. Julia was also stunned, leaving no one to snap back at me. Are we done here? I've decided to renounce my inheritance, so do as you please from now on. But in return, I won't help. Please, no further contact. Though my voice trembled slightly at the end, I managed to say everything I wanted. It was time to leave. I signaled Ben, and just before exiting, I turned back to pull an envelope from my bag. Oh, right, this is the compensation you threw at me. I haven't used it, so the amount is still the same. Consider it a return gift for the birth celebration. It's a bit more than what you wanted, but let's call it severance. I placed the envelope in front of Julia, who was too shocked to react. Leaving the four of them behind, we exited the house. Later, I heard my parents remained married, but their relationship turned icy. My mother's actions were severely restricted, effectively ending her affair with Mr. Thompson. My father stepped down from his CEO position and attempted to live off his pension, but due to long-term financial mismanagement, they ended up selling their house. When I passed by their old house recently, it had been demolished, which was oddly satisfying. Reportedly, they're now living in a rented apartment, struggling to make ends meet with both parents having to work, a new experience for my mother, who had never worked before. Julia and her husband divorced, with Julia taking custody of the children. However, Julia, who had never worked before and now had 2 children to care for, found it impossible to manage on her own and ended up imposing herself on the man she had an affair with. It turns out this man was already married and currently embroiled in his own domestic troubles. Despite feeling some sympathy for her because we share the same blood, a part of me can't help but think she got what she deserved, considering everything she has done in the past. Chris tried to turn his company around after the divorce but found it impossible as his reputation had already been tarnished, leading to severed business ties. His stocks plummeted after leaving the umbrella of the parent company, making it impossible for him to continue operations. Eventually, Chris's company went bankrupt. Furthermore, Chris, now penniless, fell for a marriage scam through a matchmaking app, losing even the compensation Julia had paid him. He also accumulated debt from dubious sources and is now laboring in construction every day to pay off his debts. Ben received a call from Chris begging for money but firmly refused, citing they were strangers. Given Chris's last words about divorcing me, I find no room for sympathy. As for me, I've recently discovered that I'm expecting our first child.
phúc em tròn là bao dòng. Em khóc thầm những giọt lệ rơi ướt cả trái tim anh. Đừng khóc nữa mà không được buồn, em xứng đáng với những nụ cười mà bấy lâu nay em không được những điều ấy. Dù có thế nào anh vẫn chờ, cuộc tình ấy em cố gắng nhiều rồi, mệt mỏi phải không? Phải anh đây tựa vào đi. Có khi nào em nhìn lại phía sau mình, có khi nào em thấy một người thương em hơn bản thân mình. Được thấy em cười, người ấy đánh đổi tất cả. Dù hạnh phúc em trao cho ai không phải người ấy, rồi ngày nắng phai nhạt đi dần. Hạnh phúc em cho là bao dòng. Em khóc thầm những giọt lệ rơi ướt cả trái tim anh. Đừng khóc nữa mà không được buồn, em xứng đáng với những nụ cười mà bấy lâu nay em không được những điều ấy. Dù có thế nào anh vẫn chờ, cuộc tình ấy em cố gắng nhiều rồi, mệt mỏi phải không? Phải anh đây tựa vào đi. Đừng khóc nữa mà không được buồn, em xứng đáng với những nụ cười mà bấy lâu nay em không được những điều ấy. Được những điều ấy. Dù có thế nào anh vẫn chờ, cuộc tình ấy em cố gắng nhiều rồi, mệt mỏi phải không? Phải anh đây tựa vào đi.
Ben was overjoyed upon hearing the news and had already started designing a child-first home. He's even getting ahead of himself by selecting babysitters, which makes me laugh at his excitement. We're expecting a boy. I'm estranged from my family, and Ben has no relatives, but the people in our town have been incredibly kind, offering their help in various ways. To be born into a town where everyone is so kind, this child is going to be so lucky. Ben and I talk about this every night. How are you feeling today, Anna? I'm feeling quite well today, thank you. That's great. I hope a healthy baby is born. Yes, thank you. When I go out for a walk, everyone greets me like that. It makes me so happy, and I truly feel grateful to have come to this town. Anna. I couldn't decide between blue and green for the blankets, so I bought both. You're getting ahead of yourself again. While I chide Ben for his frequent purchases, I knit socks for the baby, planning to finish them a week before the due date. Oh, he kicked. Really? It's Daddy here. At my word, Ben listens to my stomach and talks to it. Just then, the baby kicks again. He answered. You like Daddy, don't you? Daddy loves you too. Oh, Ben. Despite being a bit exasperated, I find Ben's actions endearing. Immersed in this happiness, I continue knitting the socks.